Hello there engineers, welcome to Prompt Geek. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how you can create infinite character portraits using Stable Diffusion with the Dynamic Prompts and Wildcards extension. And I'm going to show you how to create your own wildcards to control the exact items and elements the picture will show. Let's start off by installing this extension. You're going to go to the Extensions tab, Available, Load From, search here for Dynamic Prompts. You're then going to install it with this button, go back to Installed, check for updates, click Apply and restart the UI. When you start Stable Diffusion, you'll now see down here in the Extensions area Dynamic Prompts, and it's automatically enabled. There are resources on the GitHub page for this Dynamic Prompts extension. We've got the syntax, tutorials, lots of information there, and you could of course read all of this, or if you would prefer, carry on watching this video because I'm going to show you exactly how it works right now. So I'm using Rev Animated for this. This will work with any model that you're running. Dynamic Prompts lets you create prompts here that can change all of the elements randomly. When using dynamic prompts, I actually like to think of it almost like it was an NFT project. With NFTs, they're automatically generated and they have different items, different hairstyles, different colors and facial features, but they are built to have things swapped and changed. You want to have the same level of variety available to you with your prompt as well. To start off with our prefix keywords like best, quality, masterpiece, painting, of. Now the first dynamic element we're going to have here is whether this is going to be a male or female character. So we're going to enter that here. You need to open with a curly brace. You're going to put in the first choice, male, separate it using the pipe symbol, and then the next option, female, and we have to close that off with a closing curly brace. Next, we need to decide what character is going to be. We're going to put in another open curly brace, and let's come up with a couple of options. So we'll say knight, barbarian, wizard, necromancer, and maybe vampire. Could be fun. We close that out with another curly brace. Now let's go with the color of hair. Add in a few colors. We close out again, and we'll finish this prompt with hair. We could also put in a hairstyle here if we wanted. I've just chosen a few braided, long, cropped mohawk, and we want to obviously end that with hairstyle so that it knows that's what is created. We want our character to have some piece of headwear, so we will write here wearing, hey, and then we're going to do again our curly braces, and we're going to put in a couple of items here. And another point is probably worth here, just so we avoid any not safe for work images. YouTube wouldn't like that too much. Maybe you would, you filthy lot, with your waifus. Let's put in here dressed as. Got to make sure that they're wearing clothes, haven't we? Because we know that some of these models do tend to get a little bit hot under the collar, should we say. We can then put in the camera angle that we want, and we'll just give it a fantasy setting right now. And then we're going to close this off with our suffix keywords such as realistic, cinematic, volumetric lighting, painting by ArtStation, highly detailed, and 8K. We've got our prompt here. We could probably stick in easy negative, set batch size up to 4, and we're going to generate, and you're going to see 4 different results. And if we have a look at them, you can see here we've got best quality masterpiece, painting of a male dressed as a vampire with blonde hair, long hairstyle wearing animal ears, portrait in a magical forest, and the rest of those prompts at the end there. It's chosen those from the prompts that we have inside of our curly braces. So really fantastic. However, you might want to use this over and over again. You may not want the background just to be that one particular background. And if we add more in here and use the curly braces method, then we'll end up hitting our 150 token limit very quickly. So we can actually use wildcards for you can download other people's wildcards who've kindly uploaded them to Civet AI. They are effectively just text files that you can download. You need to make sure that when you've downloaded them, they're in a zip file. You will need to then put them into the Stable Diffusion folder, Extensions, Dynamic Prompts, Wildcards, and then you want to extract them here. You'll then be able to use them quite easily by just calling them up in the actual prompt editor. So if you go back to Stable Diffusion, you'll go to the Wildcards Manager, and you'll want to then hit this button here, Refresh Wildcards. The wildcards you've saved will appear here and follow a file structure. So if you put them in a folder, the folder will appear here, and you can then go into the folder and select from there. Let's go with a standard one for now. If we go here and just choose architecture, you'll see there that you see the name of the wildcard, and then you can also see all of the actual types of architecture listed inside of the wildcard. Now, a wildcard is effectively a list of keywords. So we're going to copy this, we go back to our prompt, and we're going to add it in here instead of this magic realm. It's going to set scud in front of, and then we'll just paste it in. Now, when you type them out, it's double underscore, then the folder name, slash, then the name of the text file, followed by another 2 underscores. That's how you call it. We then are going to hit generate. The first one here is a female wizard with black hair, and she is stood in front of a river. Looks pretty nice. We then have this one, which is a little bit gross looking. It'd say female dressed as a knight, wearing blood on her face, stood in front of a wasteland, and you could see that it definitely looks like that. You can go a lot further than this, and you can build your own wildcards. I'm going to show you how. So building an effective wildcard takes planning. Now, we've actually done a lot of that already here in that. If you look at it, we've come up with a structure already. To make your own wildcards, you don't need any special software. You can make it in Notepad. We've copied our existing prompt because we're going to use that as the basic structure. Let's paste that in here. We want to keep our opening prefix keywords, including painting of, hey, and let it choose male, female here. There's no need to have a separate file. Here though, where it says knight, barbarian, wizard, necromancer, vampire, these don't have to be here, because what you can do with your wildcards is you can actually nest them inside of other wildcards. Let's first save this one, give it a name. So we're going to call this one Fantasy Prompts, and just save that in our folder. We create a new notepad, and we're going to list in here all of the types of characters that we want our character to potentially be. Now, you can either list them all out yourself by coming up with the ideas, or you could, of course, go to somewhere like ChatGPT and get it to create a list for you. And I've done that because I'm lazy. I'm going to paste that in. And so we've got a list there full of all of the different types of character. Let's save this now as well, and let's call this character type. So to call this a wildcard and use it as a nested wildcard inside of here, all we can do is we go back to the fantasy prompts file. We're going to take these options, we're going to get rid of them, and what we're going to do is we're going to type underscore underscore, and then we're going to type in character type, because that's the name of the file, followed by another 2 underscores. Now when we run this, it's going to actually get to here, and it's going to open the character type file and choose an option from that list. Now with the hair color, we've only got a few hair colors. We probably don't need to actually change this. Sometimes having a wildcard isn't really actually that efficient when you've only got 4 or 5 options and they fit nicely on a line. So we'll leave those there. But what we would probably want to do is have more hairstyles. So this is another file that we could make. We then have the character wearing a crown and all ears or something like that. So we'll do the same here. We'll actually create another wildcard here, and we'll pull this one headgear. We've got our shots there. I'm only using few, so I'm going to leave them as they are. You can do another thing with dynamic prompts called globbing, which is where if you have, for example, many different hairstyle files, you can actually have it pull from any of them. In this instance, let's just say that we didn't have fantasy at the beginning. In fact, a better syntax would be to have hairstyles fantasy, because then I might have another file which I call hairstyles urban or hairstyles sci-fi. And in order to actually use any of the hairstyles files, it's as simple as calling the wildcard, and then at the point where the names are similar, you can just pop in an asterisk, and when you run it, it will look for any wildcard that begins with the word hairstyles. So this can be really powerful as well. Now I don't want our character to just be stood all the time, so let's turn this into a dynamic prompt. And also it's worth pointing out you can actually set weights to these as well. So let's say that we don't want too many of our characters to be running. Okay, so before each of the keywords, you simply type in the weight that you want it to have. So we'll go 0.4, and then you follow that with just 2 colons. Now, the other thing to point out though is that if I set this to 0.4, it will assume that the other keywords in this array here, is it an array or a string? I don't know, I can't remember. But the other ones inside of these curly braces will all actually be set at 1. So I always suggest that unless you want to go through all of these and give them all custom weights, you only attach weights to the ones you want to turn up less. So we've got this standard location wildcard. If we left it like this, it would pull the location from that existing wildcard. However, we're going to have our own here. So let's delete this, and we're going to put our wildcard in here instead, called fantasy setting. We leave our suffix keywords as they are. That is now ready to go. We've created all our files. They should all be inside of the wildcards folder under extensions. Just make sure we've got this saved with any changes, and check that you've got all of your wildcards in the folder and they're all there ready to go. So now we just go back into Stable Diffusion. We're going to delete this existing prompt, go to the Wildcards Manager, refresh Wildcards, and see that Prompt Geek Fantasies popped up. All our wildcards showing up in the folder structure there. The main one that we're using is Fantasy Prompts. You may actually have to close Stable Diffusion and restart it for the wildcards to work properly. So ever restarted, you copy the wildcard file name, go back to the prompt, paste that there, and there we go. We've got our first set of characters using our wildcard prompt. You see here that the first one is painting of a female as an assassin, a black outfit with black hair, shoulder-length hairstyle, wearing a hood, a medium shot. She is stood in the dark abyss where stars are born and cosmic entities dwell. So you can see there, that's worked really nicely. It takes quite a bit of time and effort to actually get the structure put together in the first place. But afterwards, you can literally generate unlimited amounts of characters, or just by hitting that one generate button. Something else you can do is you can even call on LORAs in the actual prompt. So in your wildcard, and I've done this with this one, so you can see here I've asked for an Onimas. It's calling on the Samurai Punk AI LORA, and the weight of it and everything is all set up here in the actual wildcard. And you can see that you can just generate images all day long using this method. There is a bit of a quirky problem because it's using a list of shared hairstyles. We end up getting some very feminine looking hairstyles on the male characters and vice versa. That might be alright, might be what you're after, but if you want something more specific, then you have to come up with a bit of workaround. If you are an advanced user, you can create templates using Ginger 2, which is a script language. You can actually get really clever, and you can have it so that if an character is a mage, it will only call on features from a separate list specifically for magical characters. It's a little bit out of my reach in terms of skills right now. So there's a couple of workarounds. The first, of course, is that you create 2 separate wildcards, and then you will use the different one depending on whether you want male or female characters. There is a cooler way to do it, and that's by actually creating variables inside of your wildcard. So I'll open our wildcard here, and we want to create a variable right at the beginning of this. To signal a variable, use the $, followed by an open curly brace, and then we're going to call the variable. This is where you put the name for the variable that you want. We're going to call it gender, and then we do the equal sign, we put an exclamation mark, and then we're going to put in another curly brace, and here put male, pipe, female, and then the closing curly brace for that, and of course the closing curly brace for the first one we opened with. That is what sets our variable, and then what we can do is here where we've got male, female, we're going to replace that with the $, the open curly brace, the name of the variable, and then the closing curly brace. Now whenever you mention gender in after this, it will use the gender you've chosen here. Let's put here $, open curly brace, gender, closing curly brace, hairstyle. That fantasy hairstyle. Now what this is doing is it's chosen the gender here, and we've told it what color we would like it to choose from. And then we said with A, and it'll say here now, male or female fantasy hairstyle. This is a great way to deal with variables if you have to. Make sure we say now and let's generate again. We've got 4 very different images here, all pulling from the wildcards and the variables that we set up there. A painting of a female fantasy hairstyle, again, female fantasy hairstyle, male fantasy hairstyle. So it's really worked incredibly well there. This is a very powerful tool for being able to do this very quickly. And then just a couple of last points. There are a couple of other options here you can use. One being Prompt Magic. This one here is very easy. You write here, a woman on a hill, press generate, and Prompt Magic is going to fill out the rest of the prompt for you. And you could even get lazier than that if you really wanted to. You could choose the I'm feeling lucky button, and you can just hit that, and it'll just do whatever it feels like doing. But if you want to be able to make amazing, infinite amount of character portraits for your project, big story, maybe for your RPG that you're playing, then you're going to want to make use of dynamic prompts and the Wildcards Manager. And even just knowing how to do those dynamic prompts, it's great if you want to iterate and test out different things in your prompt. Give it a go. Let me know how you get on in the comments down below. I hope that you found this video useful, and if you did, please make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. But I will see you in the next video. Until then, see you later, prompt engineers.